Welcome to the ChangeMakers podcast, brought to you by cityCURRENT and powered by Lipscomb Pitts Insurance. This show shares personal stories and insight from those who are giving back and making a difference, so we can learn and do the same. We cover life lessons, business advice, passion, and purpose. Now here's our host, Jeremy Park.
Welcome to the ChangeMakers podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're in for a treat. We have the founder of cityCURRENT, so he's our founder for our organization, but he's also the co-CEO of Lipscomb Pitts Insurance. He's a change maker. He's Johnny Pitts. How are you doing, Johnny?
I'm doing great, Jeremy. Glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Hey, you make it easy. You're a few floors down in terms of our office, so we're shooting right now, or we're taping this in our office, so that makes it really easy. But you know, most people see you, you're heavily involved in the community, but they don't necessarily know your backstory, your Memphis roots. So that's going to be the fun of this show, is talking about really growing up here in Memphis. And obviously we'll talk a little bit about cityCURRENT and Lipscomb Pitts Insurance, but we're going to have fun talking about your personal philanthropy. So start out, you are a Memphian. Give us a little bit of your history being raised right here in Memphis, Tennessee.
I think I'm either a fourth or fifth generation Memphian. Our family came from the original family. You know, my great-great-grandfather was very poor, and my grandfather worked in the Firestone plant. In fact, so did my two uncles, which is up there right off of Millington. And that's where we were destined to be, as factory workers and stuff, which was great jobs back in the days. And anyway, my father was the first in his family to ever go to college, and he had to work his way to earn money to pay for the tuition and everything. Of course, World War II interrupted some of those things. But, you know, the fact that I've been here so long, I get a perspective that people that haven't lived in Memphis, I get that perspective, that's different. And I've seen where we've been. I've heard where we've been, but mostly I've lived where we've been. And I now get to see where we are now and where we're going. And let me tell you, it is some kind of exciting.
Talk about your father served in the military. Share a little of that experience, but really kind of how he brought that into the family.
Well, he was, everybody back then was drafted. And in fact, it was almost an embarrassment not to be in the war. And my dad was no exception. He was 18 years old, and he was stationed in Bremerhaven, Germany, right at the very end of the war. But an interesting story, he was an Eagle Scout. I say was, he's no longer living, but he is an Eagle Scout. I'm an Eagle Scout. My son's an Eagle Scout. But a great story that he told me about leadership in World War II. They landed in the ship in Bremerhaven, and the colonel came out as the boys, the young men, were deployed into a big open area. There were about 1,000 of them, and the colonel was trying to decide who the leaders were going to be. And so he asked the group with a megaphone, how many of you, raise your hand, how many of you were a Boy Scout? And my dad said half the group raised their hands. And the colonel shook his head like, wow, that's too many. He goes, step forward if you were an Eagle Scout. And 20 of them stepped forward out of 1,000. And he said, you guys are going to be the leaders. Wow. So that, really stuck with me. And, of course, he pushed me to get into Scouts. And once I got involved in it, and I was electrified and really moved. It changed me dramatically, than my son as well. So, having your father guide you and direct you from that perspective was really helpful.
And kind of piggyback that a little bit, because I think one of the neat things is I talk to so many parents here that say, their son was involved in Scouts, and you really played a pivotal moment in their life of making sure that they became Eagle Scouts. And so you kept them on pace, and you made sure that they got all their electives, and kind of take that one more step further in the sense of, scouting really has become who you are, but it's not just you and your family, it's the outreach of many other families as well.
Well, scouting doesn't work unless you have volunteers and parents of the volunteers. And I'll never forget back when my son was getting ready to join a Cub Scout pack. They basically got all the parents in one room and said, okay, we're walking out, and y'all need to decide who's going to be the Cub Master. And I was the only person with any real experience in that. I was, heavily involved in Scouts, of course, growing up as being an Eagle and being a senior patrol leader and so forth. So I said, all right, I'll do it under one condition, and that is that every one of you be involved in helping, many hands make light work. And so they vowed, to do that. And we took it a step further, and it was interesting. There were 13 boys there They were 7 years old. And I looked around the room and I said, look, I'll take them all the way to Eagle. We can do that together, but I'm going to need your help. And you took it forward probably 10 years, 10, 11 years, 12 years, and 12 of those 13 boys made their Eagle Scout rank. Wow. And it was because it was a team effort.
Give us one favorite memory, fond memory of scouting with your father.
Oh, there's so many of them, but I'll never forget my dad. When I was young, it was one of my first campouts. He was assigned cook duty at Camp Courier, which is right down south in Memphis, 45 minutes from here, in Eudora, Mississippi. And so my father was going around asking all the boys they were cooking breakfast, and he said he'd walk up to a little 12-year-old boy and say, "How would you like your eggs?" And the boy looked astonishingly. He said, "Oh, well, I'll take mine over easy." Then the word got out, "I want mine scrambled. I want mine. Could you do me a boiled egg, Mr. Pitts?" And so forth. And of course, at a black iron skillet, they're all burned and scrambled. So a hard lesson learned for those boys, but all the dads had a great time with that one.
Give us one with your son.
Wow, lots of those. I tell you, I think one of my favorites was when I saw him become a real leader on a campout one time. He was one of the older boys, and I said, "Rob, I need you to teach these boys. They needed to get their what they call a wood badge." And that is they had to learn how to properly use a knife and an axe. And he had set up an area kind of with black black plastic around it and staked it off and as a safety area. You couldn't go in without talking to him to properly learn how. That's where the axes were managed at the time. And just watching him, he doesn't even know this story, but just watching boys respect an older boy and the way that they listen to him where they wouldn't have listened to me necessarily was one of those first proud moments from a leadership standpoint.
Give us maybe one lesson. It can come from father, mother, even a sibling, that when you look at your childhood, something you learned from them that you carry forward to this day.
Well, there's lots of those. I think that it's really more than just childhood. It's advice in general. But in fact, I remember, Jeremy, you and me were at dinner one time with Attorney General John Ashcroft, and we asked the question to the general, what was the one thing you would, advise us? And he goes, and I'll quote, it was a Mark Twain quote, and he said, "It's not what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know that just ain't so." And I'm telling you, I have really used that a lot. And having to rethink my position on things when I'm so certain, I'll ask another person to make sure that I'm not just myopically going down some rat hole thinking that I'm correct, and then boom, I'll get surprised. So, and I've told my children that same thing. So I think, as we get older, I ask a lot of questions. I ask people that have been around a long time, what advice do you have? And sometimes it's really sage advice. Sometimes it's something as simple as, work hard. And I remember my father gave a speech one time at a church, and when he was building a church for the church that he was in, and he came up with the slogan, and I read the slogan. It was on a shovel, and it said, "We're hard at work." And I kind of laughed at it, and everybody goes, "Wow, that is so philosophical. I wonder what he means by that." So sometimes you come up with simple things that people read a lot deeper into them than what you really intended.
Give us, you mentioned the fact that your father has passed, but what's something that when you look at how you remember him, how do you remember him? Give us a story, or what puts a smile on your face when you think about your father?
He was dyslexic. And he admittedly said, he was a C student and had to study to get C's, but he was an amazingly wise man. He kept things really simple. His way of communication was so simple that he could talk to, and he did talk to the Queen of England. He talked to leads of state, but yet he'll talk to a 12-year-old Boy Scout, and the same clear communication goes through as to what he wants to communicate. He always told me, he goes, "I speak the internet." He goes, "I speak any language." And I said, what do you mean you speak any language? And it's sign language. And he would make it a challenge to go to foreign countries where there was very little English spoken, and just to try to get around. He always liked to go to grocery stores and churches and schools and the mayor's office and things like that, just to try to but to communicate via his hands and gestures and things. And you can imagine what those kind of things were looking like. But he was really excellent at that. And I think that's the thing that's really passed down, that he passed down, is this ability to listen, keep things simple, and communicate.
You always tell the story that Lipscomb Pitts Insurance was basically created over a cup of coffee. Share a little bit of a teaser for that story, but talk about it in the context of you now working in the insurance industry. Was that always something that you, growing up and seeing your father, you thought, hey, that's for me? I mean, but tell the story and then how it relates to you personally.
Well, Matt Lipscomb Jr., that's his partner, was out of the war as well. He's a Navy aviator. And after the war, he worked for Liberty Mutual Insurance Company as a salesman. In fact, he's one of the top salesmen in the Southeast U.S. And my dad was hired by Liberty Mutual. Well, after a year or two, the two of them became the number 1 and 2 salesmen for Liberty Mutual in all the Southeast. So right down here on Cooper Avenue, they stopped at a coffee store one morning, for a 10-cent cup of coffee, and said, you know what? We ought to do this on our own. And the brainchild of Lipscomb Pitts Insurance Company was invented at that point in time. And what was interesting, back in those days, we opened in 54, but that was probably 1952 when the discussions were made. Getting an insurance company to back you was a huge deal. So having a building showing that you've got staying power and you're there was critical. So it's hard to believe, but they built a 4,000 square foot building with not, they didn't have a lot of money. But that's what they did to build. That was their show of force and stability, that they were serious about what they were doing. And that was very important. So they got their first contract and then, started writing personal insurance and then moved into the commercial lines business and, blossomed from there. So that's the brief history of how we began.
Did you always, seeing your father work in the insurance industry, did you want to work in the insurance industry?
Well, not necessarily. It was interesting. He never pushed me, which was, I think he learned. He asked a lot of questions, and a lot of times when fathers or parents, push a child in a particular direction, it's felt as pushing, and they obviously don't want to do it. I think what he did is he was wise enough to say, he kind of slowly dripped it to me over time and showed me the opportunities. And he invited me to conventions and to different things, and I would go, "Wow, you get to do that? At your job? Wow, that's interesting." And then the freedom that he had, and finally it clicked. My sophomore year at the University of Tennessee, I called him and I said, I think I'm going to major in insurance, and then we'll talk more. And so I changed my major from just general business to insurance. There were only 4 of us there were only 4 insurance majors in the University of Tennessee in that time frame. And all 4 of us were fraternity brothers, interesting enough. And all 4 of us are still in the insurance business, interesting enough as well. But after that, I still worked on my own. I had my own business in the summertime. And then when I graduated, by that time we'd made an arrangement for me to work at an insurance company in Nashville to get some experience, and I did that for a year, then came back here.
Talk about working with and for your father, but then ultimately working with Matt and kind of taking over the reins.
Working for your father is really unique and different. I felt more pressure, not from him, but from the other employees, than had I worked somewhere else. I think there was some sort of, although it wasn't spoken, like I've got some advantage and they're going to do more for me or something. In fact, just the opposite was true. In fact, our dads, we were somewhat, man, I talk about, we were penalized. Our income, I think my first year was $10,600. And if I didn't make it on commission within the first year, then I was going to go to a straight commission, which turned out to be a blessing for me because we sold a lot of business. But there was nothing given to us, I can assure you. So it was difficult from that standpoint, but retrospectively, it was the best thing they could have done.
And so talk about the transition of taking, co-CEO, but working with Matt Lipscomb III now and being co-CEO?
Well, Matt is about 3 years older than me, had been here, and he was an insurance major at the University of Memphis. So, and he worked at an insurance company just like I did. So he was 3 years in advance of me and already been, on the ground running. And I came in, and Matt and I are lifelong friends. I mean, we've been, in fact, I think he is the longest friend I've got. I mean, I've known him since before we even knew, how to talk, because our mothers, were friends. So, but I knew how Matt was, and I knew he was an honorable man, smart man. I mean, he's way smarter than me, and not as fast, but he's smarter than me. He is really intelligent, no kidding. He was like the 3-time state of Mississippi Latin champion, just a super intelligent guy, honorable, hardworking, all the traits that you look for in a partner. And as we progressed as producers, as sales guys, young 20s and stuff, we realized that we could really make a good partnership. And what's interesting, it's difficult to and it was truly, we had a partnership, it was a general partnership, and it meant 50-50. You had to work things out. It was very much like a marriage. I mean, there was no alternative to an exit strategy. You had to work things out. And to this day, we have a simple rule. We have a philosophical meeting once a year to go over, do we still like it? Is this fun? Are we treating each other right? All those kind of things. And, we have a rule that says if the other guy is really emphatic about a position, the other guy gives in. I mean, we've lived by that for more than 35 years. Most people don't understand that, and you feel like, well, I lost here and I won here and stuff. But that's part, just like you have a marriage. You have to work at it. You have to be committed to it. You have to want to do it. And we have wanted to do that.
Talk about the community side, because I think you personally, and we've touched on it with Scouts, but you're heavily committed to giving back to philanthropy, to the community. So talk about the importance of community regarding the agency as Lipscomb Pitts Insurance.
We've always been a firm that feels like we've been blessed in a community with all the business we write. We insure well over 100 nonprofits, and have felt that with that blessing, we have a sense to give back. And kind of you were here, Jeremy, when we did this. We started, say, with cityCURRENT, which was the Lipscomb Pitts Breakfast Club back then. We started really pushing the nonprofit arena in a different way. I mean, a very heavy way. In fact, it was originally a network type organization, and now it's anything but that. The networking occurs, of course, but now we get to give back in so many different ways, money and time and all the efforts that we put into it. And, we were way ahead of the curve from where businesses are now, I feel. We were doing that way back then. But the original thing, here's the aha moment. But this was probably 20 years ago. I'll never forget it. When we interviewed people, I interviewed people or potential employees. I batted 100%. I mean, if we wanted somebody, we got them. And I'll never forget, this bright young lady came to me and she interviewed, and I thought, okay, we're going to get her. She's really sharp and everything. Call her the next day and she goes, man, I really would like to come to work for you, but I'm going to go to work for FedEx, is who it was. And I said, really? Why are you not coming to work for us? She goes, Johnny, there really wasn't a way that I could get plugged into the community via L&P. And man, I mean, that was a dagger to the heart. And I said, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you awakening me to that notion. And I mean, the next day I said, that's it, we're changing. We're going to have ways to be more involved in the community where our staff can get involved in it, and that has changed dramatically since that time.
You alluded to it, and I kind of mentioned it, referenced it at the outset. But you're the founder. It was the Lipscomb Pitts Breakfast Club, as you mentioned, started back in 2005, and now obviously rebranded to cityCURRENT because, as you said, there's so much more to it. You've got well over 150 events for the community, all free, and then you have this huge media side, including the ChangeMakers podcast. But go back and tell the story, because I think it's really, to me, it's fascinating because starting as a networking organization back in 2005. A lady wants to bring this to Memphis. You step up and say, hey, I'll help you get this going. But then ultimately for an insurance agency to buy out a networking organization, that's a big statement. And I'd tell the story even further in the sense that, I had just moved here from Los Angeles. So you're taking over a networking organization, which once again in the context for an insurance agency to buy a networking organization and bring it in-house is definitely a little odd. And then to hire somebody from LA to run a networking organization who doesn't know anybody in the city is a little more odd.
That's
but
right.
That it's a big statement because I think, one, to put that amount of dedication in, the amount of resources, even for the team around, the other owners and things at the time saying, wow, this is a little crazy. This is a big step to take in terms of the commitment to the community to be able to make a difference. But tell that from your lens.
I got the call about this time of year 12 years ago, I guess, 13 years ago, whenever it was. And this guy was director of radio marketing for the NFL, and he had come up with this concept of Breakfast Club America. And what he did is he took it to cities like Memphis, for example. He was already in Florida, and he heard about me through another person in Florida and said, Johnny Pitts is the guy in Memphis you need to talk to. So he called me, and as he was going through it, I'm telling you, it wasn't 3 minutes in the conversation, it clicked. And he wanted us to be the title sponsor for, I think it was $50,000 or $60,000 a year, and that's a lot of money for any size firm. But I asked him to come up here. He did, and when we met, I said, I'll do it under one condition. We have to do it my way or our way, and that is it's not just about networking. I want to do some other things. And it turns out he honored that and let us have some flexibility in some of the things that we were doing. Well, not much more than a year later, the Breakfast Club America entity itself just dissolved, and it was a franchisee type operation, which you alluded to, and a female lady in Germantown owned it, and she really was over her head, and sweet lady. And I said, look, let me just buy this from you. So we negotiated a price, and it was fair for both parties, and we ended up buying it. And then Amy Bingham, who was with me at the time, as you know, Jeremy, helped me build this. We built it up from there. Then Amy wanted to start a family, so I asked her, and you had come in like the month or two before selling me radio space or with Amy, and I said, Amy, man, what are we going to do? You're going to be leaving. Man, who could possibly replace you? And she goes, you remember Jeremy, don't you? And I said, I actually do. I remember the moment you sat across from me at my desk. I remember what you were wearing and the seat you were sitting in. So I called you, of course, at that time, and we got together and we hired you. And the fact that you had all your LA experience really helped a lot. But I didn't know even until now how important that experience was. I was hiring a young, aggressive, intelligent guy, but I didn't know your experience would come into play like it has, which is really the benefit. But you're the kind of guys. You're a partner. You're a partner here at Lipscomb Pitts Insurance. But as you know, we run this thing together. You run it. I mean, make no mistake about that. We get together like our little philosophy meetings that we have from time to time, where we're on the same page doing the right things. But it gives me the freedom to do what I need to be doing, and that is running our company. And we get together, as to review things. So it's been we've just cracked it open now. I mean, just to think that at the time people asked me, did you think you would ever have a TV show, a radio show, the Spark Awards, write 2 books, have podcasts that you're featured on like this? I would have said, are you kidding? And now that we've done this, I'm thinking, well, what else?
Right. What's next? That's the fun of this. It's been a journey for sure. You kind of touched on it, but give me one thing that you're really proud of. I mean, now you've gone from roughly, a handful of events now to last year. Actually, for this year, we're doing the end of the year presentation, so I have all the stats fresh on my mind to be 183 events in 2016. So that's 183 events that we're hosting and coordinating and underwriting and everything else. And then you have all this media, which, as you alluded to, you have TV shows, radio shows, podcasts, books, freelance journalists, columns in the Commercial Appeal, even Forbes magazine now. So crazy focus on all the good things going on and how people can leverage that to help themselves to be more of a spark and a catalyst in their own community. What makes you the most proud out of that almost 11 years of evolution and growth and development? What puts a smile on your face?
I would say it always comes down to individuals and people. If you're helping those that are maybe less fortunate than you, that can mean nonprofit organizations, but it's also being a positive change, an element of change where you're having a real positive difference in your community. I don't know if it's not us that did this, but I remember just a handful of years ago when you and me would have to defend our city. I mean, even against our own citizens, saying, this is an awful place, and we made, you remember Forbes most miserable city list. I'll never forget that one. And you know the story with that. Just briefly, they printed Forbes magazine, Memphis' most miserable city. Jeremy and I got so upset about it. We called the Forbes editor, Rich Carlgard, found out who he was, and said, we're going to invite you to Memphis. And it took us 2 years, but we got him. And he came in, and we gave him the grand tour and everything, and he left, and we've made about 10 best something list.
Well, but we made no bones about it. We said, we want you to come here and speak to our group, but we want to show you our city. We want to show you really what's going on. He had never been to Memphis before. We rolled out the red carpet. I mean, you even offered to take him biking on the Green Line and everything. Yep. So, and unfortunately, the weather didn't hold up for that. But he had a private dinner with people like Fred Smith and Pitt Hyde, and everybody went around talking about all the great things going on in our city. And so he got to hear and see firsthand what the city really was like.
I think that one other thing we've done consistently, I've never had a speaker come in here that hasn't been wowed by, number one, our Southern hospitality, and number two, walking away with going, man, what is it with your city? It is so cool. I mean, you've got such a culture. It's so soulful and everything. So to me, one of the other things that we've done, I think, is we've created ambassadors throughout the country and throughout the world. I mean, people leave here and they go, man, Memphis is hip, man. It's unlike any other city. And it is. It is really different. It's not, so many other cities have the 6 degrees or 5 or 4 degrees of separation and before you can connect with someone. Memphis, it's 1. I mean, you can make one call and boom, you can get connected with the most important person you need to meet in the city of Memphis. And I think that's what's the soul and culture of our city is. We're such, a giving city. We're ranked, of course, in the tops in the country about giving and philanthropy. That shows in the personality of every citizen that we have here, and I think people are like that. So, to me, there's those are the types of things that I guess I'm more proud of. It's hard to put your finger on one of them.
Going back to the personal side for you, you're heavily involved with youth villages, so many nonprofits here. Give us maybe one or two other ones that you, besides the Boy Scouts, are really excited and proud to work with.
Well, of course, I go way back with youth villages and the Boy Scouts. Also, Carnival Memphis, which is a great organization. We've given away almost $2 million to charitable organizations over the last probably 10 or 15 years. One of the most unique boards that I'm on, that I'm actually chairing, is an organization called Innovate Memphis. And in effect, what we do, we are a idea incubator and creator and solutions-based company. Very few people, but they're all young, smart millennials. And let me give you an example of what we're tackling. We go to the city, and we go to the city of Memphis. We go to the mayor. We go to the various leaders in the city of Memphis and say, give us a problem that you just don't have time to fix or tackle, or you don't have the funds to do so. And they said, man, we got to tackle blight. We just don't know what we're going to do with it. So our team, literally, there's 244,000 parcels of land in the city of Memphis. So we actually inventoried all of that land, because you can't go in and fix on a broader scale unless you know how to, what is it, how you measure all the metrics of it. So what we did is we got our team to go by, and they literally over a several month period inventoried all the property, what was blighted, all the definitions and the conventions definitions that we would place on them, and then we came up with a plan. One of which was called mow to own, where you can go in and a neighborhood has a dilapidated area. If you mow it long enough, and there's certain rules, I don't understand what they are, but you can actually own that land over time. you make you could after say a drug house in a neighborhood it can be torn down because we can get an environmental issue released on it. We can tear it down and make it into a neighborhood park. We give it to that neighborhood. They put up swing sets. They grow flowers. They do, food plots and whatever else that they want to do, and it drives away the bad stuff. So those are the kind of things that we do at Innovate Memphis, and I'm really proud to be in that, involved in that organization.
Talk about getting, you kind of referenced it earlier too, is with the interview, the one that got away, we'll say, but engagement is so important with employees. And especially with millennials, you hear it all the time. That's one of the first things is they're looking for companies to get them plugged in. They're looking for opportunities during the workday to go out and volunteer. Share with us your philosophy on why it's so important for businesses to open up those opportunities to get employees involved. Talk about why it's so important.
Your millennials in particular, if you look at that group as a whole, they are all about getting plugged in the community, giving back. And as employers, you can't miss that. If you take a look at all the studies, within the next 10 to 15 years, your baby boomers are going to be gone and retired. So selfishly, we ought to be looking at what do we do to get these to really get the millennials involved in our company, in our community via our company. So, it's a good business move, but it's also the right move. You ought to feel good about it. It'll be part of your culture and your mission. Believe me, when people are interviewing in your company, they're going to be asking you questions. Nowadays it's funny. As I interview people, I'm kind of getting interviewed myself. They're asking me, "What about your company? What are you guys doing? How are you doing it? Do you give time off to get plugged in? Do you do this? Do that?" So it's important to be a real company from a culture standpoint to have that give back component.
We talk about a lot in the giving back column in the books and things that, things like a modified work schedule where they can leave a little early or come in a little late, but go and volunteer during a work day, and the company is able to track that and to be able to use that as a part of their giving back efforts. Things like casual Fridays, which we do a lot here, where you can dress casually, t-shirt, jeans, and then donate $5, $10, and all that money goes to a nonprofit, and you'd be surprised how much money you can raise. But you can do a lot of things with your employees during a work day to be able to give back. What's something that you would offer as advice to other business leaders, others that work in communications, but just something that you think this is something that has worked well for us that I would say companies definitely need to explore?
There's a lot of different ways to go with that, but some of the things are to ask those. You got some employees that a lot of your employees perhaps sit on a board or they're involved in some organization somehow, and offering a specific thing that we do is that we actually built our conference center on our first floor to have the ability to be a multi-purpose venue, so that if a nonprofit wanted to come in, and which many do, we have it booked quite often, either during work days or during the work day or after hours. They've got a kitchen facility there. They can eat lunch. They've got bathroom facilities. They've got AV equipment and all that kind of thing. So to me, you'd be surprised how many nonprofits don't have or have the capacity for physical space for meetings for more than, say, 10 people. And by offering that up, that's a really good thing, from that perspective. And then, other things too that we've actually done is we have, we've had so many different wellness things here that our employees like, and we have one young lady that teaches a Zumba class. We have Matt and I from time to time. We've served breakfast and stuff like that, wearing aprons and all that kind of goofy stuff. But it's fun. They want to see that your employees want to see you're a real person and that you're giving back from that standpoint as well. And
you also do a very good job of letting your team lead. So in other words, I'm thinking there's a guy right next to me that you basically let them organize and kind of run with the YMCA corporate games. And so in other words, it didn't come necessarily from top to bottom. It came from everyone at all levels working together and taking a leadership role and organizing the employees and structuring the games and making sure that we had a team out representing every sort of game that was being held, from basketball to soccer. You name it. But really the level of letting your team run and lead, I think, is important as well.
Yeah, I mean, when Tad did that, he came to me, and obviously you got to have a culture where the people are feeling comfortable enough to even come up and ask you. And so Tad came to me whenever it was, 2 or 3 years ago, and said, "Is it okay if I do this?" I said, "Oh, not only is it okay, I encourage you to do it, but you need to do it. You need to be the leadership guy on this thing and run it. And if it's me, it won't be the same." And so, and I was even involved in some of those games. So we've had a great turnout. That's been a lot of fun. And so that's what it's about. I mean, everybody comes in and works hard every day, and we ought to have some fun too. I mean, as you know, we have the food truck that comes around once or twice a year. We have, music that we play to kind of relax everybody. And another thing that I've done that is not necessarily a giving back component, but I found it's really been something special to me, is about 1.5 years I started taking 3 employees to lunch, just me and the 3 employees. And I get 3 that typically they're not on the same floor, don't work in the same department. And I take them, to Outback. I always take them to the same place. Everybody knows that's one of my favorite places to eat. But anyway, we talk about vacation, pets, what are you doing, and how's your grandchild, or what are your kids doing? And I try not to talk about, if they want to bring up business, that's fine, but I want to know about them. And it's really interesting. It's been very good for me to get to know, because I don't always, as the co-CEO, get to meet everybody and talk to them on a personal level. This gives me, although it's maybe once a year, I get to do that. And that, to me, has been a really special thing. And I've heard feedback that they've really enjoyed it as well.
So one last question, then we'll switch over into kind of a lightning round with quick ones, which is always one of my favorite parts. But last one is, you become pretty famous for the Pitts three-peat. And the idea is that you share 3 positive things, 3 great things here in the Mid-South. And the idea is that you share those 3 things in 3 minutes, and then you encourage those 3 people to share it with 3 more and 3 more and 3 more. And before you know it, you've impacted tens of thousands of people by simply sharing 3 positive things. And so it's something that everyone can do. And you're already seeing, I thought it was really neat, Todd Lochner with Principal Toyota has come out with a whole new set of commercials that he's like, you know what? I was inspired by what you're doing with the Pitts three-peat. I was inspired by cityCURRENT, what's going on there. But you're seeing this kind of new adoption, if you will, of this idea of the Pitts three-peat. So talk about the importance of that, but just how everyone can play a role in being an ambassador for our city.
When positive news takes a little bit of effort, it's disturbing to me, and all the media do it, and particularly TV stations. But I get people tell me all the time, "Oh my gosh, look at all the murders, look at all the problems we got in our city." And I'll say, okay, what I want you to do is, on your next trip to Atlanta or Birmingham or Nashville or Dallas or Denver, LA or Chicago, wherever you're going, I want you to turn on the 10 o'clock news and tell me what you see. It's always the same. It's fire, rape, murder, and problems. That's the stories that lead. And that's probably not going to change. So it's up, and it's easy reporting that stuff. They turn on the police band, they go follow and find where's the fire, and they turn on their cameras and everybody watches. It's a little bit more difficult to seek out positive news. And believe me, I've met with so many of the TV stations and the media saying we can give you an eternal trunk show of positive news if you would just air it. And they're just not that motivated by that. So therefore, it's up to us. It's up to the citizens. It's up to business owners to search out the positive news and to defend our city. I mean, when I hear somebody bashing our city, I'm gonna tell you, I get ticked, and I'll tell them, I'll say, where'd you get that information? First of all, I'll ask them to, clarify where they got it, to make sure it's just not hearsay or gossip. Most of the time it is. But then also it's doing something like we've done, and that is to, when Forbes writes an article about our city, and usually it's 1 or 2 persons' opinions. It's not like it's some big Gallup poll that they're, that they've done. It's that, so you can go in there and you can do something about it, and then all of a sudden, look what happens. So, to me, I think it's taking leadership, and don't take it when somebody's bashing your city. Just like if they're bashing your family, you're not going to sit there and take that. You're going to defend it, right? So, to me, it's about being proud and passing along the positives, from our city.
Well, there you go. Let's switch over to one of my favorite parts. This is the lightning round. So these are basically just quick answers. I just throw out, there's no script for any of this, so I just throw out random questions and you just have fun with it. So it gives us a little bit more of an inside scoop into your world. So what's a recent trip you've taken?
Man, I've had a lot of those. But my most recent trip was I went down to the Bahamas to go bone fishing with my son down in Flamingo Key. And that was truly an epic trip. Yeah, we had a lot of fun and a lot of bonding time, me and him, and we fished together for 3 days, caught a lot of fish. Bone fishing is like hunting and fishing at the same time. It's hard. You got to be really good fly caster, spot the fish, and then reel them in, and it's a really fun trip.
All right, so I'll tie some of these in so that way people can get a chance to know a little bit more about your family. So we'll say a favorite track meet, or so your youngest is a pole vaulter. So give me one favorite memory on watching your daughter pole vault.
Well, I'd say my overall favorite probably went back into high school when she actually broke the state record her senior year, and that was at a Houston High meet. I'll never forget. It was the spring of her senior year, and I knew exactly what the height was, and I told in fact, I felt it. I called some friends of mine. I said, I think Mary Carson's going to break the state record. This is the all-time state record, by the way. This isn't just some district or something. This is the all-time historical Tennessee state record. And I had a lot of my friends show up. And sure enough, not only did she qualify for the region in the high jump, but she broke the state record 4 times. Wow. I mean, she kept going. It was 12.2. She jumped 12.3, 12.4, 12.5, and I think 12.6, and then 12.7 in a state meet later. So it was unbelievable. She's had a lot of collegiate success too. She's a centimeter off the 2-lane outdoor record, which she'll break, I'm sure, this spring sometime. But that was probably my all-time proudest moment.
Give me one. You're about to have a new addition to the family, but with Jennings, your oldest, give me one favorite moment there.
So, Jennings, being my oldest, a pretty good favorite moment, of course, is when she told me she was getting ready to have a grandchild and a son. That's kind of hard to beat there. But we've done so many little things together over the years. I've taken all of my children individually on trips, just me and that child, over the course of their lifetime. And I think with her, one of my favorite times was when she was in high school. I took her to a Christian camp called JH Ranch, and we spent the week together and did a lot of different activities, but spent a lot of time together, and that was a really special time.
Where's your favorite place to go as a family?
Without question, that's an easy one. Jackson Hole, Wyoming. My son Rob lives there. He's been there for 4 years, and it's arguably the most beautiful place in the country. It's got everything we love to be. We're all active outdoors people, and you can fish and bike and climb and hike and swim and raft and kayak, everything that you want to do if it's outside activity is there, all within a 5 to 10 minute drive, literally. In fact, I biked to most of the places out there. You got 2 national parks within an hour of each other in Yellowstone and Teton national parks. And then you've got beautiful, fabulous restaurants downtown, so you can be muddy and dirty and worn out and all that kind of stuff, and then get cleaned up and go in and eat a nice meal in town, and all right within a 15-minute drive.
What's your favorite city to visit internationally?
Internationally would probably be, trying to narrow this down, I would say probably Paris, maybe London. I hate to, although I've been to some other Eastern European cities, which I've loved too. It's kind of like saying which kid's your favorite. I'd say Europe maybe is my favorite area, continent. And although I haven't been to Australia, I'm going to be doing that in October. So I'm going to have to just tell you that's my favorite continent. Well, but besides the good old U.S., of course.
So what's your favorite restaurant to eat at? We'll say outside of Memphis first.
Well, it used to be this restaurant in Phoenix, Arizona, and I've forgotten the name of it. It's been a while since I've been there, but I'll describe it to you. It's really a beautiful place. It was Arizona's T Cooks. That's the name of it. T Cooks. T Cooks is located in the Royal Palms Hotel, And what I like about it is it's a really unique venue. You go in and they've got this like outdoor patio with plants everywhere, water fountains, and the backdrop to the whole thing is Camelback Mountain. And you walk into it, they call your name, you'll have a drink out there or something before dinner, and you go through this kind of like small library / bar, and it's got nooks and crannies, and nothing is cohesive. It just kind of breaks up, which kind of it gives it the attractiveness. And then the restaurant itself is just over the top, and they've got this giant oak tree literally growing right through the middle of the restaurant, and the food is off the charts. So that's probably my all-time favorite restaurant.
What's your favorite thing to do with guests coming to Memphis? Where do you like to take them?
I think I'm getting ready to change that a little bit. So I had interesting that my brother-in-law is a choir director for a Baptist church, and he brings his seniors in every year. In fact, I'm kind of the tour director. So he says, where do we need to go? So, of course, we go to Graceland. We went to the zoo, and then all the classic places. We went to the National Civil Rights Museum, and all the other types of museums that we went to. And then we added Bass Pro Shops this past year. And, man, they spent, we couldn't get them out of there to the buses. It was the craziest thing. So Bass Pro Shop is definitely a destination that people need to go to, and of course Beale Street and some of the other places like that.
Favorite TV show or favorite thing to watch in general, so we can leave it open for sports?
Yeah, sports, of course. I love to watch sports. Particularly, I love to watch track meets. It's not the greatest spectator sport unless you've done it, like our family has. So I like to watch track meets. And then some of my favorite shows, like if I'm on my bike upstairs training in my playroom and I'm sitting on it for 2 hours and you get kind of bored, I love watching Andy Griffith, the old original, all those black and whites, and stuff. They're so classic, and they're so timeless. And even though I've seen them 20 times, I know what Otis is going to do. He's going to come back in his jail cell, but it's just fun to see that.
What do you like to do to relax?
Well, that's not part of my vocabulary, and I think anybody that knows me knows that. But ironically, my method of relaxation is actually intense workouts. And that's why I work out in the afternoon after work. I'll get on my bike and ride, or I'll run, or I'm a triathlete. It's one of my hobbies, and so I'll either, like tonight, I'll ride for a couple hours, and tomorrow night, last night I ran for an hour. So it's that really, believe it or not, physical exhaustion really relaxes me.
So what's a personal record? What's a PR for Johnny Pitts?
My PR let's take the short, this is really getting specific, but it's called a sprint triathlon, which is 750-meter swim in a lake, a 20K bike, which is 12.6 miles, and then a 5K run, which is 3.1 miles. My PR, which I did I think it was the Nationals 3 years ago, was an hour and 8 minutes. That won't mean much to anybody, but it was pretty fast for an old guy like me.
Well, I think it's funny. You'll challenge the other, especially the younger producers here, and say, "Come on, you guys can each take a leg, and I'll take you all on myself." So,
yeah, I'm afraid that as they get younger and I get older, one of these days they're going to catch me. Not yet, though.
So, last question is, obviously we've covered a lot of ground, but what do you hope that your legacy, both with Lipscomb Pitts Insurance and with cityCURRENT, most importantly though, with just you as Johnny Pitts as the person, what do you hope that your legacy really is?
When you hit my age, I'm 58 years old and I'm in good health. I've been blessed with the same wife, Kim, for almost 35 years, 3 healthy children, and hopefully a grandson, and a business and everything. And I worked hard for it, but I've been blessed along the way. There's no doubt about that. You look at other things that spiritual things, for example, with me, and I'm working on something with some minister friends of mine now that will have more of a eternal, return. I mean, you can do a lot of things. You can give money to organizations, and you can be involved in things. But let's face it, 50 years from now, nobody will know who the heck I am, or you, or anyone else for that matter, unless you're someone that's really famous. So you look at it, I look at it and go, okay, I need to have more than just that kind of name on the board deal. I need to affect humans, in an eternal perspective. So it's not out yet, but we're working on something that will be somewhat like we'll be working with young men in the city of Memphis and helping those young men become better.
And that's exactly why you are a ChangeMaker. So Johnny Pitts, thank you for all you do, for coming on the ChangeMakers podcast and sharing your story. We greatly appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the ChangeMakers podcast, produced by CityCURRENT and powered by Lipscomb Pitts Insurance. To learn more about our guests and to share your stories of others leading by example, visit us online at citycurrent.com. Connect with us online using @citycurrent or follow the conversation using the hashtag ChangeMakers. Now, think big, start small, and act now. Be a change maker.